Hey, beautiful. Welcome to my show, Thoughts, Action, Success. I'm Kirsty Johnston, and I'm a mindset coach with a mission to help females who struggle with overthinking to get out of their head and take action in their life. So we are all on a journey, and I'm here to be your GPS, to help and guide you on your unique individual journey by sharing my personal experiences and knowledge. So on that note, let's get started on this episode where I'm going to talk about getting personal. So what is your personality? Numerous psychological methods have been devised to categorize the various personality types. Yet we know that personality is unique and evolving. So in the end, what exactly is your personality and how can you use awareness of it to progress your life journey? So what makes you you? Are you an introvert? Or maybe you're an extrovert? Do you subscribe to a particular personality type? Or does your star sign maybe say everything about you that you need to know? So is your personality shaped by nature or nurture? Or is it a combination of both of those? Personality is complex in its disposition and composition, but deceptively simple in its presentation, as it's on display every day. We say someone is fun or frivolous, serious or sympathetic, or we arbitrarily pigeonhole people's personalities. But like so many things in life, what you see is not always what it seems. Similar to your fingerprint, your personality is unique and one of a kind. It comprises many moving parts and morphs over time. Pinning down your personality is like catching a big cloud in the sky. So let's get personal. To say we think of someone's personality is a misnomer because we actually don't think about it at all. We usually just accept how someone presents themselves to us on total face value and consequently assess if there is any kind of rapport with them. Early on in an interaction, you know or feel if you like them or not. It may be that you feel threatened or comforted, have an aversion or attraction. And you make these judgments based on how they affect you, how they make you feel. You respond and temper your reactions on the view you've formed. But oftentimes we neglect to consider our own personal constructs when assessing somebody else's personality. It may be that we are naturally shy. So when we come across someone exuberant, we may typify them as boorish or overbearing. Likewise, if we are resolute or definitive in our viewpoint, we may be annoyed or irritated by an easygoing person. Whether fair or not, personal preferences are wholly subjective and based on our own idiosyncratic settings. So while you can't make a first impression twice, it is often that case that upon a second viewing, people change their minds about someone they initially didn't really think they liked. Personal constructs form part of your innate personality, and it is how you view yourself in the world. So sometimes when you come across those who invalidate or challenge these fixed ideas on life, you may feel threatened as your internal world is disrupted. For instance, you may value spontaneity, so it would follow that you may be initially averse to someone who's a real planner. Compatibility would dictate that people with the same disposition and worldview would and should be attracted to each other. But oftentimes, we see couples who are absolutely totally opposite in nature. So more often than not, a fiery individual may be a perfect match for a real laid-back person. Yes, there is conflict and disagreement in the dynamic, but somehow this combination just seems to work. Who knows? Perhaps we see in the other what we wish to possess in ourselves. Maybe that's the answer. Interestingly, what we think we don't like in another person is actually what we suppress and don't recognize in ourselves. People are complex, and this is evidenced in their personalities. Opposites really do attract. So research now shows that when companies stack their deck with extroverted employees who propagate these modern, agile, open-plan working spaces, productivity actually goes down. So now this sounds really counterintuitive, as you would think this environment would be energetic and enterprising. However, what's been discovered is that with the absence of introverts, A company actually lacks balance and perspective. After all, if everyone is talking, who is listening? At a non-scientific level, personality is comprised of values, affinities, and tastes, your natural disposition, and your temperament. So as these attributes and intrinsic sensibilities come together, a unique personality is formed. We know that personality traits can be inherited through a process of epigenetics. Certain DNA markers are switched on and off when progeny are brought into the world. Oftentimes, parents gravitate to the child with whom they most identify. Outsiders will often comment how much one child is like a particular parent or even maybe a grandparent. So we see this in their somatic presentation as well. So adopted children who are reunited with birth parents, they often show behaviours or gestures similar to them. A shared sense of humour or a particular talent can also be replicated. So these sensitivities, attitudes, and even those little quirks, they're passed on and form part of what we call the personality DNA of the next generation. This is neither random nor coincidental. However, getting into the science of personality, it does provide us with an explanation of how this shapeless but tangible aspect of our being can be understood. The founder of analytical psychology, Carl Jung, he created this template for personality theory and what comprised the psyche when he considered both the conscious and unconscious self. With the combination of the two is the sum total of personality, when the known and the unknown self are truly examined. The individual can then achieve self-realization, or as Maslow termed it, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you might have heard of it, self-actualization. This is the ultimate goal where true purpose and sense of self is discovered and then acted upon. So in his theory, there are 3 layers that comprise the self. So consciousness is the field of self-awareness. This is where the ego resides. This ego framework, it dictates our day-to-day activities and how you view your life and yourself. And then the second layer, this is the personal unconsciousness, which encompasses the thoughts that are not in that field of awareness. They may be thoughts that you actually repress, maybe you've forgotten them, or they're lost in dreams, but they're still a unique part to your life experience. It's here in this actual personal unconscious where you find what Jung famously termed the shadow self. So this is the part of you that lurks within you, that you know exists, but which you also fear, as it can be a real source of shame or perceived weakness. As controversial Canadian psychologist and Jungian scholar Jordan Peterson reports, that what you most need will be found where you least want to look. When you are prepared to look deep inside yourself to confront and reconcile with your deep nature or essence, you can find true integration. But this isn't easy. It isn't easy for any of us. And it's a real emotional thing. Sometimes it's just too much. What we could call a bridge too far. When we look at depictions of the shadow self in literature, we can say, maybe in Shakespeare, he used the witches to symbolize the darker side of Macbeth's ambition. Or maybe on a more literal level, the sinister Mr. Hyde was the shadow self of the benign and earnest Dr. Jekyll. And then when we look at the third level, so this is a more mythical or abstract entity, which has kind of a university about it, hence the term the collective unconscious. This is the real deep part of your unconsciousness. And it's not shaped by personal experiences, but rather what resides in the collective context. So Jung, he was deeply interested in religious and mythical symbology. And these cultural icons led to the inception of his seminal collection of 12 archetypes, which are there to act as symbols of the human condition and experience. Here we find the universal concept of the hero figure or the mother symbol. So when we talk about this is the figures that sit in the collective unconscious. We almost instinctively know the attributes of these archetypes. So the wise old man is the indicator of wisdom, whereas the maiden evokes innocence and desire. In Jung's theory of the human psyche, these iconic archetypes represent a range of human motivations and behaviours that are with us at the inception of our own existence. While Jung himself borrowed motifs and iconography from ancient civilizations and religions, in today's environment, we see many filmmakers and authors actually using these archetypes for their work. We see the flawed hero, Darth Vader, in Star Wars, for instance. But he also embodies the universal father figure. In the magician figure of Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, we see the embodiment of the mysterious power of transformation and possibility. But just as in the Tolkien tale, we also see the shadow self of this beloved character as he is tempted by the all-powerful ring. In his beloved hands, he could have used the ring to manipulate and destroy, just as his fellow wizard Saruman does when he succumbs to his shadow self. When we talk about personality, it's not merely about being friendly or nice. As I've shared with you earlier in the episode, it's all about layered proposition. Sometimes when you say that someone has behaved out of character, you're perplexed by that predictability or the known aspect of their personality that's been traded out for something we don't recognise. Sometimes you don't even recognise it yourself. When you get up every morning and look at yourself in the mirror, you see yourself as you think you are or as how you want to be. But when you go out into the world, you project what you think others want to see and what others do see. Jung called this projection the persona. So, of course, this is the root word of the word personality. The persona is the mask we all wear, even when we endeavour to show our true self. The persona also inhabits so many archetypes from the collective unconscious to express itself. For instance, at work, we project as the magician, the person who can magically land that account. But when we get back home, we may revert to the mother mode, where we pull out the features of nurturing and comfort. These characteristics, they aren't fraudulent. But Jung implored us to go deeper into our unconscious self, to truly know who we really are, not merely what we are or what we do, which has more to do with identity rather than actually expressing your true personality. Going back to Shakespeare, he wrote that the world is a stage and each must play a part. Well, when it comes to personality, one could paraphrase the bard by saying, the face or persona is a stage, and each archetype must play a part. So you might ask, how do you actually find what is your true personality? When you look in the mirror, are you merely looking at yourself? Or rather, should you be looking for yourself? In psychotherapy, the therapist acts as the proverbial mirror, holding up a reflection of the client's life for them to confront or grapple with, which can often be really challenging. Sometimes the shadow self emerges, and the realization of the true self is actually quite possible. So even if you don't drop your persona, once you become aware that this is what you project, you may inevitably question what you actually project. Well, of course, that is an awareness of how you're perceived and how you want to be perceived. The ego is about the relationship with itself and what you think of yourself. So a healthy or stable ego prompts a desire to show a personality that reveals as much of the true person as opposed to this masked persona. When you take a look at a 3 or a 4-year-old and see how they behave. So while aware of their existence, there's no real self-consciousness. This is the closest we get to the purest form of a personality. They don't censor themselves and just shoot from the hip. They are real. Then we get to around the age of 7, which is a real critical age where self-awareness starts to set in. So the proverbial mask is adorned, and then it seldom comes off until the other end of life when people are too old and wise. We get to a point where we don't care what others think of us. Sometimes the elderly may come off as cantankerous or eccentric. But it could be just viewed they're not prepared to stand on ceremony anymore. They've earned the right to be themselves. So they just are. Take me as I am. Take it or leave it. I don't have to impress anyone. So Jung was prolific with creating a new lexicon in psychology. So he came up with, amongst others, the terminology of introversion and extroversion. You're probably aware of them. An introvert is not necessarily the quiet or shy person, though, and even though the term seems to denote this, but rather it's someone who draws energy from within. So this then contrasts with the extroverts who draw their energy from without, and that they need others to fuel their fire. This binary proposition has become pivotal in personality politics. In fact, the arsenal of Jungian thinking when it comes to personality definition was co-opted by corporations to assist them in finding the right fit for people to populate their organizations. Recruiters, HR departments, they all now regularly use psychometric tools and tests, mostly derived and appropriated from the workings of Jung. Which of you have ever had to have those tests done when you've applied for a job? Or you've gone to an agency and they've done that when that sort of thing. I think we've all had to do them at some stage. But the most famous of these metric tests was created by a mother-daughter team who were openly fixated and enamored with Jungian theory. So they used their combined surnames to produce the legendary Myers-Briggs type indicator, MBTI. This is where this came from. This is how it was created. So if you're not familiar with Myers-Briggs, so it's made up of 16 archetypes from Jung's original 12 personality classifications. So the combination of introversion and extroversion, known as the two personality attitudes, as well as the two binary pairs of thinking and feeling and sensing, which is about acknowledgement of facts using the senses, and intuition. These create the 12 permutations to define personality formulations. Interestingly, while Jung created this theory to understand personality, he was not in support of the classification of people based on metrics. So his categorical objection came in the form of asserting that each and every individual is an exception to the rule. Further, as personality is a work in progress, it can be prone to evolution and change based on a variety of factors, stresses, personal development, age, and experiences. The personality is not a static proposition, so many of these testing regimes are inherently limited as they don't allow for that change to occur. But with that said, it's still a really useful guide to understand how we operate, how we interact, and what we are actually motivated by. Despite not taking into account how we behave under stress or when there are life variables which may cause us to think differently about ourselves, these tests adopt the precept that we are all have default settings and our homeostasis that is our base personality. As it suggests in its name, the Myers-Briggs test is only an indicator and not gospel. And as an indicator, it is useful in understanding the motivations and values of people. For instance, if we take two scientists, go back in time a bit here, we'll look at Edison and Einstein. We can glean a telling point about their personalities when you dig deep and analyse their philosophy of at work. So, Einstein said, logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. Whereas Edison, he famously said, genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. So based on the personality lexicon, we can deduce that Einstein is an intuitive person, whereas Edison comes from a place where sensations predominate. I see, I touch, I smell, therefore I know. He's a planner versus a dreamer. This is not defining by any means, but it's helpful to understand how these two men approach their work, and it would have informed those around them how to regard them. Jung asserted that human behaviour and personality traits are far too complicated to be reduced to personality types. Nevertheless, Jung's legacy has become big business, and now there's a plethora of psychometric tests that you might have heard of. Some of these. There's the DISC, Caliper, Hogan, Predictive Index, Human Metrics, Kersey Temperament, Colby. That's just some of the ones that come to mind at the moment. So these tests have become part of the HR discourse, and no candidate these days seems to get through on a good interview alone anymore. So even the advertising industry and branding agencies have appropriated junction model to ascribe personality to brands. So yes, brands actually do have personalities. This is my marketing background I'm sharing with you now. So the innocent archetype in marketing terms is about goodness and youth. So brands like Coca-Cola adopt that persona. Like Zhang, there are 12 brand archetypes in advertising too. So Nike, which you're probably well aware of, for instance, with its Just Do It logo, adopts the hero archetype. And it makes sense that Virgin and Harley Davidson, they're all about going their own way and breaking rank. So they're all associated with the rebel archetype as their branding personality. To take it the next step, and also extending from the Zhang thesis, is a system which you might have heard of called OCEAN. So this is an acronym for what is known as the Big 5 personality traits. They are as follows: openness, range of openness to being closed, conscientiousness, so this is versus lack of care, extroversion as opposed to introversion, agreeableness, opposite to contrariness, and neuroticism, with the scale going from being neurotic to calm and rational. So you can be a combination of any of these attributes and can move up and down the scale of each trait. But psychologists use this as a starting point to understand human behavior and decision making, rather than it being a definitive lens through which personality is viewed. So using Ocean as a platform, a Cambridge professor who is named Brian Little, and he's also a personality researcher, he broke down the personality profile into 3 aspects: the biogenic, which is the neuropsychology, what we think and feel; the sociogenic, which he called the second nature, so this is how we respond to the social influences and culture; and the idiosyncratic, so that's those particular aspects of our personality that are unique to us. So in his theory on personality is that if you have fixed traits, like introversion, for instance, but when you have a compelling project to pursue, then you can in fact actually move out of the comfort zone of your base settings and use other traits that are either recessive or dormant within you, but they're actually there, they do exist. So these fixed traits become, as he calls them, free traits. So in his analysis of personality, there is so much scope within the personality framework to shift up and down the scale so we don't feel hammed in by our own sense of self or presentation. So our personality is classed as being fluid when we really want it to be. There are many methodologies to understand when you start digging into this personality stuff. But in the end, it is your personal hallmark that is unique and can never be replicated. So you might now think twice the next time you make this statement that someone has a good or bad personality. What it comes down to is having a better understanding of what actually underpins your own personality and that of someone else's. It means you can show more regard to what motivates or inhibits any one of us. What we do know is this, that even though you have a baseline personality, there is room for changeability. You can flex and stretch your traits to then accommodate new settings and challenges. Further, better knowing yourself and others means you can then approach problems, tasks, and projects with so much more insight and use them as management tools. Knowing, for instance, that you might be an extrovert, but your colleague's an introvert. You might be able to mean that you could and apply it by asking more questions rather than expecting them to come forward and volunteer information. Or you simply might use it to just give them more space. You might decide to embark on courses or activities that develop that part of yourself which you don't use. It's like the cardio junkie might go all zen with meditation or yoga. Or the quiet achiever might go out and do a public speaking course maybe. You are naturally drawn to things that reflect and support your personality. But this is where you can get out of your comfort zone to find the space where true growth and development can happen. The personality is like the person it inhabits. It is forever growing and changing. adapting, and resetting. When you recognize that we are all unique, that you can see the uniqueness in others around you, it's only right that we give the last word in this subtopic to the father of the personality paradigm, Zhao Zhang. He said that in the end, we must cherish and value the otherness of the other. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Thoughts, Action, Success. And it's been a great help for you, made you think about things a bit more, and kind of given you an insight on how we continue to shape our personality all our life. Would you like to get exclusive access to a number of bonuses that further expand on what I've shared in this episode that normally are only available to my paying coaching clients? Or maybe you've still questions about anything covered in this episode. Then why don't you come over and join me in my Facebook group, Female Masterminds, where I provide access to these bonuses, other exclusive material from my other episodes, also access to tickets to my upcoming events. You'll know in advance before anyone else. So every Monday mindset sessions, which are members-only coaching sessions, and a subsequent forum where you can ask me further questions about anything covered in the episodes of this show or any challenges you are facing on your journey. But in the meantime, remember, you are beautiful and you deserve to live your best life. So we'll talk soon.